I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman, two of whose followers have been charged in the World Trade Center bombing in New York City, is appealing a ruling from the Immigration Service that he can be deported. The United States government says he should be deported because he failed to disclose when he returned to the United States in 1991 that he was a polygamist and that he had been convicted in Egypt of falsifying a check. Both are grounds for deportation, but he has the right to remain in the United States during the appeal, which could take 6 months to 1 year. The cleric has denounced violence as against Muslim principles, but he has called repeatedly for the overthrow of the Egyptian government. He joins us now from our Los Angeles bureau for his first live television interview since the February 26 bombing. He will speak to us through his own translator. He has asked that we begin by addressing him as the respected Dr. Sheikh Abd al-Rahman. Respected Dr. Sheikh Abd al-Rahman, what are you doing in Los Angeles?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني
widen my heart and make my speech perfect. Before I answer this question, I would like to have a brief comment. I came here, understand this area, not because I've been accused so I defend myself, but I accuse the American mass media of being controlled and racist. And they look for falsifications and betraying. Because mass media, they shoot my picture hundreds of times, accusing me of being a terrorist, and to reach to accuse Islam through that was terrorism. Second, they made the mosque of As-Salam in New Jersey accused the mosque as being a center for terrorism, and that initiated some people that they throw rocks and attacked the mosque. Third, if the mass media does not connect the crimes of the Jews and the Christians with the preachers and the pies, so why the media is connecting the religious figures of Muslims and the mosques and the Islamic centers and Islam as a whole with those who claim to be Muslims? And the nation that establish its system on a corrupt mass media is a big failure, and they're going to fail. And for the American people, those who have a good sense, to take the information and to look for it carefully, not from the mass media who lie to them. And the Egyptian media also shared in this vicious attack on him to justify their own crimes.
ولكي يتمكن من التشهير حيث افترى افتراءات كثيرة.
And to make a lot of falsifications and false accusations against him.
الإجابة عن السؤال.
And the answer for the question now.
أنني جئت إلى لوس أنجلوس.
I came to Los Angeles.
في جملة رحلة.
In a trip
كانت معدة من أول رمضان.
Has been prepared since the beginning of the month of Ramadan. I went through many states.
لكي أتصل بالمساجد.
So that I contact the mosques and the Islamic centers.
ونصلي مع المسلمين
and
في
pray
الولايات.
with the Muslims in all other states.
فهو أمر طبيعي في حضوري إلى ولاية كاليفورنيا.
This is a natural way that I came to the state of California.
بعد ذهابي إلى ولاية واشنطن.
After I went to Washington
وولاية
State
Oregon.
and Oregon State.
Do you know Mohammed Salama?
أنت تعرف محمد سلامة؟
لا أعرف محمد سلامة.
I don't know محمد سلامة.
مطلقا.
ولا
أعرف هذا الاسم.
And I never have been known this name before.
لكن لا مانع أن يصلي أي واحد في المسجد الذي أصلي فيه.
But there is no any objections of anybody who wants to pray in the mosque where I go and pray.
وأنا لا أصلي في مسجد واحد.
And I don't pray only in one mosque.
بل أصلي في عشرات بل مئات المساجد.
But I pray in tens but hundreds of mosques.
فلا مانع أبدا أن يأتي أحد ويصلي.
So there is no any objection for anybody to come and pray with me.
وقد سألني ال FBI
And the FBI asked me before about Sayyid Nusir's case.
كنت في مسجد يقال له مسجد الفاروق.
And I was in the mosque called the mosque of Al-Faruq.
فقلت له أنا لا أعرفه ولا مانع أن يصلي ورائي.
I told them I don't know him but I don't object him praying behind me.
إذ لست مطالبا أن أعمل بطاقة لكل من يأتي فيصلي.
Because I'm not obligated to verify everybody's identity when they come and pray behind me.
One last question on a similar matter. Do you know Nidal Ayad?
تعرف نضال عياد؟
لا أعرفه كذلك.
I don't know also نضال عياد.
أسمع بهذا الاسم.
And I have never heard about his name except when the mass media mentioned his name.
What are your feelings today about the bombing of the New York World Trade Center, the death and the injury?
ايش رايك عن فرقعة المركز التجاري والناس اللي ماتوا والناس اللي اتعوروا؟
لا شك أن هذا
There is no doubt about this act.
هزني من الأعماق.
It shaken me deeply.
ذلك أن الإسلام لا يوافق ولا يقر
does not condone and does not agree on attacking
لا على البنايات العامة ولا
not only on the public buildings or private
ولا
buildings
على الأشخاص
and not on the people whether they are individuals or groups does not agree on attacking civilians.
والله تعالى يقول ولا تعتدوا.
Allah Almighty says in the Holy Quran, don't transgress.
إن الله لا يحب المعتدين.
Indeed Allah, God does not like those who transgress.
ثانيا المسلمون بطبيعتهم لا يحبون ذلك.
In their nature don't like that.
لأنهم حينما دخلوا دولة أمريكا.
Because when they entered the United States,
أخذوا عهدا.
They took an oath and covenant and
على أنهم يعيشون في
هذه
البلاد
that they live in this country
ويوافقون على نظامها
and they agree on its judicial system and on its system.
المسلمون بينهم وبين أمريكا عهد.
So the Muslims between them and the United States there is a covenant
على احترام نظامها
to respect its system.
وهي تضم ملايين المسلمين.
And it has millions of Muslims.
فكيف يفعلون ما يضر الدولة؟
So how can they harm the one that the country that they live in?
وهم مأمورون بالوفاء بالعهد.
And they have been ordered to honor their covenant.
حيث يقول الله تعالى وأوفوا بالعهد.
Where God Almighty says in the Holy Quran, indeed respect, fulfill your covenant as the covenant is responsible to you.
ثالثا أنا عندما جئت إلى أمريكا
when I came to the United States
مهاجرا
as an immigrant,
فجئت لأهاجم النظام المصري.
I came to attack the Egyptian regime, fleeing the Egyptian regime
من خلال وجودي في أمريكا
through my presence here in the United States.
فهل من المعقول أن أرضى أن يكون المكان الذي أمكث فيه
So is it possible that the place where I'm staying at
وأهاجم النظام المصري
and I'm attacking the Egyptian regime?
هل أعمل على أي انزعاج أو اضطراب فيه؟
Isn't it possible that I disrupt the peace and break the law to the place where I'm staying at?
إن المعقول أن أكون في هذا المكان أحافظ على
أمنه. What makes sense, I should respect the system and respect and take care of the security of the place where I'm at.
وأن أقف فيه على أرض مستقرة.
And to stay on a solid ground.
لا اضطراب ولا انزعاج فيها.
No disturbance and no breaks on it.
Do you urge violence against the government of Egypt?
يقول لك أنت بتثبت العنف ضد حكومة مصر، بتأيد العنف ضد حكومة مصر.
أنا أقول الحق
I say the truth.
الذي يوجبه علي الإسلام.
I say the truth that Islam have been told me to say.
فأبين أن النظام المصري
I show that the Egyptian regime
ورئيسه حسني مبارك
and the president Hosni Mubarak
يحكم مصر بالحديد والنار.
They control Egypt with fire and iron.
ويحكم مصر حكما بوليسيا.
And they control Egypt with a police state and force.
ويحكم مصر بالقوانين الاستثنائية.
And they control the government control them with the martial laws.
وأنا أتحدى حسني مبارك
And I challenge Hosni Mubarak
من خلال هذه القناة
through this channel I'm talking now
وقنوات العالم كله
and channels of all over the world
أن يحكم مصر ولو ساعة واحدة
to control and to
بدون القوانين الاستثنائية.
control Egypt 1 hour without the martial laws.
إنه لا يستطيع ولا دقيقة واحدة.
He can't even for 1 minute.
وحسني مبارك يحكم مصر
And Hosni Mubarak is controlling Egypt
بالاستبداد والدكتاتورية.
through oppression and dictatorship.
فلا حرية ولا ديمقراطية عنده.
There is no any freedom and there is no any democracy in Egypt.
وإني لأعجب.
My question is, do you direct violence, encourage violence against the Egyptian government?
بقول لك هل أنت بتثبت الهجوم على الحكومة المصرية، يعني اللي هو العنف ضد الحكومة المصرية؟ هل أنت بتقول للناس، يعني هل أنت بتدعو الناس لهذا؟
لا أدعو الناس إلى أي عنف.
He doesn't advise people for violence, but his job is to say the truth.
كل مهمتي أن أفضح النظام المصري.
All his job is to uncover and expose the Egyptian regime.
وأن أبين عيوبه ومثالبه.
And I show the faults and I show their faults and their means.
وأبين أن حسني مبارك وأولاده
And I show that Hosni Mubarak and his children
يملكون البلايين من الدولارات.
They control billions of dollars.
وعلى العالم الغربي أن يقدمه للمحاكمة.
And for the Western power to present him to court.
أن يسأله عن ذمته المالية ومن أين جاء بهذه الأموال.
And to ask him about his financial statements and to ask him where did he get all these billions. End of the question.
You say the truth. Given the relationship, the good relationship between Cairo and Washington, is it possible that your teachings might have inspired some who believe as you do to carry out an attack at the World Trade Center?
الخطب اللي انت بتقولها هل انت تفتكر ان دي ممكن تخلي الناس يهاجموا الحكومة ويعملوا العنف ضدها؟
العلاقة بين مصر وواشنطن لا تؤثر في قول الحق.
The relationship between Cairo and Washington does not affect the saying the truth.
أنا علي أن أبين ما في بلدي.
I have to show what is going on in my country
من عيوب وفضائح.
From the faults and from the corruption.
وأنه لا ديمقراطية ولا حرية.
And there is no democracy or freedom in Egypt.
Mahmoud Abu Halima is reported to be a person the police are looking for as a suspect in the New York City bombing. And according to government sources, he is alleged to have been a driver and personal assistant for you during the last several years. My question is, do you know him? And if so, do you know where Mahmoud Abu Halima is today?
أنا لا أعرفه ولا أعرف
I don't know him and I don't know where he is.
وليس لم يكن لي سيارة حتى يسوقها لي.
And I never had a car so that he can drive it for me.
ليس عندي سيارة حتى يسوق لي السيارة.
I don't have a car so that how can he drive a car that I don't have?
Does your mosque receive any financing from any government in the Middle East, specifically Iran?
لم يأتي ليس بيننا وبين إيران.
There is no any relation between us and Iran.
ولم يأتي أي
and there is no any money we have received from any government in the
وأنا أتحدى وسائل الإعلام الأمريكية.
I challenge the American media
التي نشرت هذا الكلام
that they falsified these informations
and تأتي بأي إثباتات
to bring any evidence of these accusations.
وإلا فهي تتكلم بالباطل.
And so they don't say the truth.
ويجب أن تقدم للمحاكمة.
And they should be punished for those falsifications.
وزعموا أن المال يأتيني عن طريق زوجتي بالقاهرة.
And the media also said his wife was sending him the money from Cairo.
فكيف يبعث إلى القاهرة ثم يبعث إلى أمريكا؟
How come it is being sent to Cairo and from there it's being sent to the United States?
هذا كله كلام باطل ولا أصل له.
These are all falsifications and all lies, and there is no any base to it.
ومسجد السلام أخذ يجمع من المسلمين.
The mosque of Salam, New Jersey, he collected from the Muslims
طوال 5 سنين
for 5 years.
لكي يشتروا قطعة من الأرض.
So they can buy a piece of land.
وإلى الآن لم يصلوا إلى هذا.
And until now they can't, they didn't reach this goal.
You have said you condemn the bombing attack at the World Trade Center. Do you also condemn personally those who did it, even if the bombing involved or might have involved worshippers who have followed your teachings?
هل انت برضه ضد الناس ديت اللي هم فرقعوا المركز التجاري واللي هم تبع المعلومات بتاعتك او متابعينك يعني؟
وهذا اتهام باطل أن هؤلاء
This is a false accusation that these people who bombed the World Trade Center, they are my followers. These are false accusations.
فأنا يتبعني كل من يعرف الحق.
Those who follow me, they only know the truth.
وكان كما بينت.
And as I said before,
أن الإسلام يبغض الاعتداء.
Islam does not condone attacking.
نحن لا نحب ولا نقر.
And we don't like and we don't agree.
أي اعتداء لا على بنايات ولا على أشخاص.
Attacking any personal properties or civilians.
You have accused the media of calling you a terrorist, and I point out to you that this news network, CNN, has never, ever referred to you as a terrorist, and I think you should know that, sir.
بيقول لك يعني CNN عمرها ما قالت عليك terrorist.
CNN من أول القنوات التي شهرت بي.
CNN was one of the first networks that they said that, and they showed my picture.
صورتي عشرات المرات.
And they showed my pictures tens of times.
لماذا تنشر صورتي؟
And one they are showing his picture in such an incident.
ولم يتبين اتهامي.
And there has been never any clarification that he is being accused of such an incident.
إن CNN من أول القنوات المتهمة بالتشهير بي.
CNN is one of the first networks that been accused of falsification and connecting me to this incident, and every half an hour they are showing my picture, and while they are showing the people who have been accused of bombarding the World Trade Center. So what do you think out of that? That means I've been accused by CNN that there is a connection between me and the World Trade Center bombing.
حيث تنشر صورتي في موضع الاتهام.
Because they are showing my picture in the way of being as if I've been accused.
وعلى هذه القناة أن تلتزم الصدق.
And for the CNN to please fulfill the truth and the trust.
CNN, sir, has covered this story since the beginning in a fair, in a balanced manner. And we have accurately reported statements from you, as well as statements from local police authorities and FBI authorities.
FBI قالوا كل الحقيقة اللي موجودة، يعني بيقول لك احنا قلنا كل الحقيقة ما زودناش فيها.
And as part of our continuing coverage, that is why we are pleased to interview you live on worldwide television this afternoon.
And say the FBI have never been accused me, so how come you show my picture in connection with this incident?
The FBI said that some of the suspects arrested in connection with the World Trade Center bombing worshipped at your mosque.
بقول لك راحوا وصلوا في الجامع بتاعك.
يصلوا في المسجد في أي مسجد.
They can pray in any mosque.
لا تربطني بمثل هذا.
But there is no any connection between me and them.
بأني متهم.
And don't show me to all the world that I've been accused.
لماذا عندما فعل عيسى في تكساس
why the false Jesus in Waco, Texas been accused,
وقتل من الشرطة ما قتل,
and he killed from the law enforcement what he killed,
واعتدى على نظام الدولة,
and he transgressed against the system of the country.
لماذا لم تربطه بالكنائس ولا القساوسة؟
You have not connected him with the churches and the preachers.
لماذا تكيل بكيلين؟
Why are you weighing things with two scales?
لابد من العدل.
You have to be fair
دولة تقول
in
إنها
a country
تحرر العدل.
that seek justice.
How strongly and how long will you fight United States government efforts to expel you from this country?
انها تمشيك بعيد من البلد، تكرشك برا البلد يعني. هتقعد قد ايه تحاربهم عقبال ما تمشي برا البلد؟
انا لا احارب احدا.
I'm not fighting against
اسير على نظام قانون الدولة.
But I'm following the laws and the system of the country.
وقانون الدولة يكفل لي.
And the laws of the country, it gives me the right to appeal.
فتعبيرك بأنني أحارب هذا خطأ.
So your expression that I'm fighting your deportation is wrong.
وإذا اعتبرت أن القانون واتباع القانون محاربة فأنا أحارب.
And if you think that following the laws and the regulations is a fight, so I'm a fighting.
وهذا الحكم من القضاء كان منتظرا.
And such decision from the court was expected.
لأن القاضي حقق في 20 يناير.
Because the judge he verified this in 20th of January.
فلماذا أصدر حكمه بعد هجمة الإعلام الشرسة؟
So why he made the decision so quickly after the attack of the mass media on me?
إن الإعلام وما نشر حملة مسعورة.
The media and what they portrayed about this false accusations against me affected the United States opinion, public opinion.
وتأثير أيضا على المحكمة.
And it also affected the court's decision.
وهذا أمر منتظر.
And that was expected.
I would like to get your reaction to a news story that has come from Cairo, and I will quote briefly what the story says, and I'm quoting from the Reuters newswire. Egypt said on Thursday it did not have enough evidence to try Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman. General Ibrahim, a senior security official, said, quote, until now, there are no specific charges or enough proofs to bring him to trial in connection with events in Egypt. I don't know whether you were aware of this official statement out of Cairo, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are and what your reaction is.
ايه رايك في الجمله اللي هم قالوها دي في القاهره؟ مفيش اي حاجات ضدك ولا في اي قوانين ضد.
النظام المصري
The Egyptian regime
متردد لا يستقر على أي رأي.
They are hesitant and they don't make up their mind.
فتارة ينسب كل الأحداث إلي.
Sometimes they relate all the accidents and all the problems
وتارة تصرح جرائده بأنه يطلبني من أمريكا.
And then another time all the newspaper make some statements that he had been wanted in Egypt.
وتارة يقول حسني مبارك أنه قتل 30 في مسجد أسوان.
And sometimes they say Hosni Mubarak killed 30 people in Aswan's mosque.
انتقاما مني لأنني فجرت تفجير في نيويورك.
As a revenge from me because I set up the World Trade Center bombing in New York.
وهذه الأكاذيب تنشر. And
all these falsifications are being reported in the newspapers.
وتارة يقولون إنني طلبت السياسي
من another time they say I've been asked asylum to Switzerland.
لأني متورط في تفجير نيويورك.
Because I've been involved in the World Trade Center bombing.
هكذا تذكر الصحف المصرية.
These are what the Egyptian government's newspapers say in falsifications and in misleading.
فكيف يقولون الآن أنني غير متهم؟
So how come now they say I've not been accused of anything?
إنهم لا يستقرون على رأي ولا يعرفون.
They don't make up their minds.
أي نظام في تصريحاتهم.
They don't know any system about what they are reporting and they say.
If you are expelled from the United States, where will you go?
لو أنت مشوف من أمريكا هتروح فين؟
أرض الله واسعة.
The land of Allah, God, is very wide and very large.
وأمريكا قارة من 6 قارات.
And America, United States, is only one continent of 6 continents.
تبقى 5 قارات.
So there are 5 continents left.
ولن يضيق الله علي أرضه.
Allah will not make the earth narrow on me.
وستستقبلني عشرات الدول.
Tens of nations will receive me.
وترحب بمجيئي إليه.
And will welcome my coming to them.
If the Mubarak regime were to fall in Egypt, would that have a stabilizing effect on the Middle East or a destabilizing effect?
هل ده هيكون عامل مثبت في النظام في الشرق الأوسط ولا هيكون عامل اهتزاز للشرق الأوسط؟
سيكون عامل الاستقرار والطمأنينة.
It's going to be stabilizing factor in the Middle East and for tranquility and for peace.
وحينما يقوم الحكم الإسلامي في مصر.
And when the Islamic rules Egypt,
سيكون مصدر سلام على العالم بأسره.
It's going to be a source of peace for the whole world.
وسوف يشعر العالم بطمأنينة.
And the whole world will feel peace and tranquility.
وثبات للأحوال لم تشاهد قبل ذلك.
And the stability of conditions have never been seen before.
I would like to return to a discussion we had a few moments ago about what CNN has done, allegedly, and not done in its coverage of the World Trade Center bombing. And I want to reiterate to you that CNN has never characterized you as a terrorist, and we have never said that you are a terrorist.
CNN said
قالت ذلك بالصور.
They said that with pictures.
وإن لم تقله بالألفاظ.
And even if they didn't mention it by words.
حينما تنشر صور المتهمين.
When you show the pictures of the people being accused
هذا الحادث.
in this accident.
ثم تنشر صورتي.
Then you show up my picture.
ما معنى ذلك؟
What do you think this means?
CNN حملت حملة شعواء.
CNN had a vicious attack
علي.
On me.
وبينت أني كأني
And they showed me I'm the first one to be accused of that.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the last part.
بقول لك ما سمعش الجزمة الأخيرة دي. قول الحتة الأخيرة تاني. CNN
قالت اتهمتني بالإرهاب.
They said they accused me
بالتصوير.
By showing my picture.
بالألفاظ.
Even if they didn't say it by words, they showed my pictures on the TV many times with the people being accused, even though they didn't mention it in words. So the one who sees the CNN TV, they perceive that as if me is the first one to be accused of bombing through what you are showing on your screen.
Well, clearly, other networks, not only in the United States, but around the world, have shown your picture, just as news magazines have shown your picture. I'm looking at a magazine, an issue of Time magazine, and your picture is on the front page. And very frankly, we leave it up to our viewers to make conclusions.
أنت لا تعتدي علي ثم تقول أترك للمشاهدين.
Don't make an attack on me and say you leave this up to the viewers.
ما دامت حقيقة لم تظهر لك.
As long as the truth has not appeared yet.
لا يصح أن تنشر.
You shouldn't show my picture.
صور من لا علاقة له بالأمر.
With the people who've been accused.
When will you be returning to your mosque in New Jersey?
بالك ما تجاوبش على السؤال.
بحريتي.
Whenever I please.
Well, we want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to go into our Los Angeles bureau. And we thank you.
Is there any word you want him to seal his talks with?
Pardon me?
He is asking just for one more last statement. Is it possible?
Please, go ahead.
يقول لك ماشي قول الكلمة بتاعتك.
نداء للغرب بعامة.
This is a call for the Western power in general and the United States in general.
أيها العالم الغربي.
Oh, the Western world.
أنتم تدعون إلى حقوق الإنسان.
You are calling for the human rights and to respect of freedom.
فلماذا لا تعملون على حقوق الإنسان؟
You are not working on respecting human freedom. Human rights all over the world and especially in the Orient.
لماذا لا تعملون على وجود حقوق الإنسان؟
Why you are not working for human rights in these areas?
النظام النصري
Egyptian regime
يهدر حقوق الإنسان.
Is attacking people's freedom.
فلماذا تساعدونه؟
So why are you helping them?
ولماذا تعاهدونه؟
Why you are making relations and governance and strengthening this regime?
Very respectfully,
بيقول لك لحظة واحدة.
I must tell you that we are out of time, regrettably.
بيقول لك اوكي بيقول لك احنا الوقت عندنا ما فيش. قول له بقى شكرا ولا حاجة.
And we thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with the respected Dr. Sheikh Abd al-Rahman. He was in our Los Angeles bureau, and we repeat, CNN will continue to report the bombing of the New York World Trade Center and related matters and related personalities fairly. When will you be returning to your mosque in New Jersey?
الجامع بتاع نيو جيرسي رجع له انت. بالك ما جاوبش على السؤال.
بحريتي.
Whenever I please.
Well, we want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to go into our Los Angeles bureau. And we thank you.
Is there any word you want him to seal his thoughts with?
Pardon me?
He is asking just for one more last statement. Is it possible?
Please, go ahead.
يقول لك ماشي قول الكلمة بتاعتك.
نداء للغرب بعامة.
This is a call for the Western power in general and the United States in general.
أيها العالم الغربي.
Oh, the Western world.
أنتم تدعون إلى حقوق الإنسان.
You are calling for the human rights and to respect of freedom.
فلماذا لا تعملون على حقوق الإنسان؟
You are not working on respecting human freedom. Human rights all over the world and especially in the Orient.
لماذا لا تعملون على وجود حقوق الإنسان؟
Why you are not working for human rights in these areas?
النظام النصري
Egyptian regime
يهدر حقوق الإنسان.
Is attacking people's freedom.
فلماذا تساعدونه؟
So why are you helping them?
ولماذا تعاهدونه؟
Why you are making relations and governance and strengthening this regime?
Very respectfully,
بيقول لك لحظة واحدة.
I must tell you that we are out of time, regrettably.
بيقول لك اوكي بيقول لك احنا الوقت عندنا ما فيش. قول له بقى شكرا ولا حاجة.
And we thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with the respected Dr. Sheikh Abd al-Rahman. He was in our Los Angeles bureau, and we repeat, CNN will continue to report the bombing of the New York World Trade Center and related matters and related personalities fairly, objectively, and in an accurate way. I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Early Prime is next for our viewers in the United States. Next week. New York Governor Mario Cuomo helped reopen the second tower of the World Trade Center today, 3 weeks after the bombing there. Coming up later on Prime Time, an interview with the man some suspect is behind the bombing. That's News Brief.
Tonight, the mysterious spiritual leader accused of inciting people to terrorism.
Were you involved in the bombing of the World Trade Center?
Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace questions the man whose fiery sermons in New Jersey call for violence on behalf of Islam. His followers have been linked to a series of murders, including former Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and New York Rabbi Meir Kahane. The man who's on the government's list of suspected terrorists and now on the verge of being deported. Tonight, Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman.
Why is it that wherever you go, people end up dead?
We're back with more government.
Kellogg.
Prime time. Now from New York, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. You're about to meet the man who's become a symbol in this country of anger, danger, and the call for revenge. He's Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman, the cleric who has been accused of inspiring people to murder. After the bombing of the World Trade Center, he was hard to find, but Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace tracked him down 2 days ago.
He is known around the world now as the incendiary Islamic minister, who preaches holy war against the government of Egypt, and is said to be the shadowy figure behind the World Trade Center bombing. But when we caught up with Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman this week, it was in this quiet neighborhood near Los Angeles. Outside one home, federal agents who follow the Sheikh everywhere he goes. Inside, the 55-year-old blind cleric received us on the floor of a small bedroom.
You came in peace and you were peacefully received and respected.
One of his followers calls the Sheikh a 16th century man, caught in a 20th century world. But others say he's a canny politician. But while his message to his followers is filled with talk of enemies and violence, he tries to charm outsiders with a tone of moderation, and in our case, a little English.
10 words?
When we began our interview, the Sheikh wanted to talk first not about abuses in Egypt or U.S. policy, but about the media, which he said has portrayed him unfairly as the mastermind of the World Trade Center bombing.
أنا لا أقف موقف المدافع عن نفسي إنما أقف موقف المهاجم.
I did not come to defend myself, but to attack the American media because it is controlled, it is racist, and it accuses the innocent. The American media does not link the man in Texas who claims to be Jesus with Christian priests. It does not link the crimes of Jews with the rabbis. So why does the American media link the Muslim suspects in the bombing with Islamic leaders and Islamic mosques?
What is the truth about your involvement with the World Trade Center bombing?
لا علم لي بهذا. I had no knowledge of this explosion and I'm not responsible for it. Are you? I came to America as an immigrant attacking the Egyptian regime and its corruption. It doesn't stand to reason that I would like for the place in which I live to be unsafe.
Did you encourage an act of violence?
I did not encourage and I did not know and I have no relation to this.
The Sheikh insists no good Muslim would carry out such an attack. Yet 3 men who are believed to have worshipped at the Sheikh's mosques now stand indicted in the investigation. Mohammed Salameh, he allegedly rented the van that carried the bomb and the storage locker where the bomb may have been made. Nidal Ayad, a chemical engineer traced through phone calls made from the storage locker. And Ibrahim El-Gabrowni, whose address was found on the van's rental documents. Investigators are probing possible ties to the Sheikh.
Do you know Mohammed Salameh?
No.
Do you know Ibrahim El-Gabrowni?
No.
Do you know Nidal Ayad?
No. I don't know any one of them. Maybe they pray in mosques where I pray.
How do you explain the apparent involvement of the 3 Muslims who have been arrested in connection with this case?
These people are being investigated. They are still suspects, and the accused is innocent until proven guilty.
Did you ever tell your followers about things that were wrong in the United States and the need to fight what is going on here?
Yes. I tell my followers that American society suffers from things like drugs, adultery, homosexuality, the loose bonds of the family. All these are bad factors in American society which should be altered.
But the Sheikh's tone of moderation with us is very different from the message he smuggles back to followers in his native Egypt on audio cassettes. In the poorest slums of Cairo, young fundamentalists listen to his fiery sermons, calling for the violent overthrow of President Hosni Mubarak.
The tone is strident, is vulgar, is crude, and very unabashed in the way he dismisses his enemies.
Asad Abu Khalil of the Middle East Institute has spent years studying the Sheikh's teachings.
How dangerous is the Sheikh?
His danger is in that he certainly has no moral qualms based on what I read from his speeches to condone acts of violence, even the ones that are directed at innocent civilians.
Experts say the Sheikh issues fatwas, religious dispensations, giving his followers permission to commit some act of violence in defense of Islam. When Egyptian President Sadat was assassinated in 1981, it was widely reported to be the result of one of the Sheikh's fatwas.
Sheikh, did President Anwar Sadat deserve to die?
نعم استحق أن يموت بما فعل.
Yes, he deserved to die because of what he did. And Mubarak deserves the same thing, because Mubarak will never be left by the people to kill hundreds and imprison tens of thousands. This is not a fatwa, as many would understand. It is just an opinion I thought of expressing in view of what I expect from the Egyptian people.
And that is your personal opinion, that Mubarak should be shot down in the street?
قلت إن الشعب هو
I said the people will do that.
Sheikh Abdul Rahman was arrested and tried for Sadat's murder, but the court could not link him to the crime committed by his followers. 10 years later, Egypt's tourist industry is now being crippled by a string of attacks against Western visitors. Once again, Egyptian investigators say the Sheikh is behind the violence.
As self-defense, is the murder of tourists legitimate?
لم يقل أحد أن قتل.
Nobody ever said that the killing of tourists is permissible. But tourists should be polite and should respect Islamic traditions, and they should know that tourism is not only gambling and nightclubs and alcohol. And what is being done is to try to stop tourism in order to embarrass the government.
The murder of tourists is a protest.
الهجوم على.
The attacks are not against the tourists, but against the buses carrying the tourists in order to stop them. If they wanted to kill all the tourists, they would have done that, but this was not their aim.
Sheikh Abdul Rahman says he opposes all who break the laws of Islam, and he includes on that list Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and Saddam Hussein of Iraq. His goal, to establish in Egypt an Islamic state, as the Ayatollah Khomeini did in Iran.
He is the man who gives the authorization, the green light, if you will, to any violent action that takes place.
Vincent Canestraro is the former chief of the CIA's counterterrorism operations.
What is the Sheikh's Iran connection? The Sheikh has been on the payroll of the Iranian government since 1981, and he receives funding from Iran through the Iranian intelligence service.
You say that's flat out?
I say flat out because there is good evidence. They provide him financial support, and they have also provided training for some of his followers in a camp in the Sudan.
Sheikh, do you get any financial support from Iran?
لا الحمد لله.
No, thank God. We do not receive any money from either Iran or anyone else.
There are reports that Iran sends you money through one of your wives in Cairo.
Through my wife in Cairo? It should be the other way around. If they want to send money, they should send it from Iran to America directly. The American media says we have received a check for $50,000, which is false.
Explain something to me, Sheikh. Why is it that as a man of God you feel so comfortable talking about fighting, about war, about death?
Why didn't the American Revolution use love? When there was colonial power and the American people wanted to get rid of it, why did the American Revolution defend its land? We do not want anything more than our land.
In fact, the Sheikh professes great admiration for the U.S. He has long been on the State Department's list of suspected terrorists, but was able to get into this country in 1990 on a tourist visa because of a bureaucratic follow-up.
Why did you want to come to the United States?
I wanted to come to the United States in order to uncover the fact that the Egyptian regime misleads the West by speaking about the existence of freedom and democracy in Egypt.
The Sheikh explains that the open society here makes it a good base of operations for fighting the Mubarak regime. But investigators say the Sheikh's trail of violence now extends to two countries. In Egypt, the assassination of Sadat was followed by others. The Speaker of the Egyptian Parliament in 1990. Anti-fundamentalist writer Farag Foda in 1992. And recently, the campaign of terror against tourists. In New York and New Jersey, reputed followers of the Sheikh have been linked to the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane and the death of activist Mustafa Shalabi. Then, 3 weeks ago, the attack on the World Trade Center. And just 75 minutes later, in Cairo, the bombing of a popular cafe.
Why is it that wherever you go, people end up dead.
نحن لا يمكن أن ندعو
We can never call for violence. We call for love, forgiveness, and tolerance. But if we are aggressed against, if our land is usurped, we must call for hitting the attacker and the aggressor to put an end to aggression.
But Sheikh Anwar Sadat, the Speaker of the Parliament, Farak Fodi, the attacks on the tourists, all in Egypt, in this country, the murder of Maya Kahane, Mustafa Shalabi, the bombing at the World Trade Center, it becomes a long list of self-defense.
الشائعات
The rumors are numerous and plenty. But where are the facts? I have never been condemned by a court of law.
But officials say that you are very clever, that you incite your followers to commit these acts, but you never leave your own fingerprints.
وعن هذه المهارة.
Does this mean that I can fool the FBI?
Sheikh, why do you think it is that a 55-year-old blind cleric frightens so many people in the U.S. and in Egypt?
لأنه يقول الحق.
Because he says the truth, and the truth hurts.
الحق ثقيل على النفس.
And the truth left me with no friends.
He certainly has no friends in the U.S. government. Yesterday, a federal judge ordered him deported. The Sheikh's lawyer said he will appeal. When we spoke the day before the ruling, the Sheikh said the U.S. was caving in to pressure from Egypt.
وإني لأعجب.
I wonder how can a country that respects human rights, how can such a country follow a regime that violates human rights and treats the human being in a worse manner than it treats animals?
You want to stay here in the U.S.?
أريد البقاء.
I would like to stay in any place where I can defend my cause and defend Islam.
What will you do if you are deported back to Egypt?
بفضل الله.
If I go to Egypt and I'm imprisoned, this will be a good opportunity for me to meditate and to worship God. And if I am killed, I will be a martyr in the cause of God.
What does the Sheikh want?
He wants Islamic order to take over the universe. As fantastic as that sounds, that's what he says he wants.
But on this day, under fire in the U.S., the Sheikh was making no such claims. He escorted us outside for a final conversation.
Should the U.S. people be afraid of you?
هل الشعب الأمريكي يجب أن يكون خائفا منكم؟
لا الشعب الأمريكي يجب أن
No, the American people need not worry about me and should love me as well as I love them.
Despite the efforts of U.S. officials to deport the Sheikh, with all the court filings and the appeals process available to him, it could take months, even years, before he's actually expelled.
Charged Southern California's best Prime 9 News.
He's been labeled a terrorist in his homeland and in ours. His preachings reportedly advocate overthrowing the Egyptian government. He's been linked to the assassination of Anwar Sadat, to the killing of controversial Rabbi Maya Kahane, to attacks on tourists in Egypt. And now, Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman is being associated with the bombing of the World Trade Center. It is a charge he calls an outrageous fabrication of the media.
Islam does not condone attacking.
Is the Sheikh being falsely accused? He's here in the Southland tonight, and he's agreed to 3 interviews. One with Primetime Live, one with CNN, and one with Prime 9 News at 9. He's standing by live to talk with us on this Thursday, March 18th, 1993.
California 9, KCAL TV. Now, Pat Harvey, David Jackson, weather with Carl Bell, and Tom Murray on sports. This is Prime 9 News at 9, Southern California's most honored newscast.
His face is everywhere, but until now, we've known very little about Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman. Tonight, the man who has been a mystery breaks his silence here on Prime 9 News at 9 with an extended live interview. But first, up front reporter Carrie Pfeffer tells us about the man who has both condemned the World Trade Center bombing and been tied to it. Carrie?
Pat,
Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman has been traveling the country, he says, quietly visiting mosques and Islamic centers across the West. Tonight he's here speaking out about a laundry list of charges that he says have been wrongly connected to his name. For a soft-spoken religious man, his influence is said to reach far beyond his storefront mosque in New Jersey. If you were looking for a world headquarters, a place that's been linked to acts around the globe, this is not what you would expect. The second-floor mosque was frequented by both of the suspects in the World Trade Center bombing, according to investigators. But the exact connections have been unclear. Today, for the first time, the man at the center of many of those charges came forward on CNN this afternoon.
He has asked that we begin by addressing him as the respected Dr. Sheikh Abd al-Rahman.
Also today, an immigration judge has ruled Sheikh Abd al-Rahman could be deported from the United States for not revealing he was a polygamist, and that he was charged in Egypt with falsifying a check. The cleric has 10 days to respond to the charges and is allowed to remain in the United States while he appeals his case. Sheikh Rahman's followers have been connected with the assassination of Egyptian leader Anwar Sadat and the street shooting of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Sheikh Rahman has been vocal in his criticism of the Egyptian government and is living in the U.S. in self-imposed exile, but his influence is still said to reach to Muslim fundamentalists around the world, despite the humble trappings of his mosque. The Sheikh has also let it be known that he sees the media as part of a conspiracy, helping spread falsehoods about him. We should also make it clear he has not been charged or even officially linked to any of the World Trade Center bombing activities. That's something that he's very sensitive about, and obviously his face and the World Trade Center bombing pictures have been linked many times.
And he is here to answer those charges himself, and we're going to hear his side of the story. Thank you very much, Kerry. Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman joins us live tonight from West Covina. He will be speaking through an interpreter. You should know we've agreed to a few ground rules. The Sheikh will make an opening statement, then we'll talk. Then the Sheikh will make a closing statement. Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman, welcome to you, sir. Your opening statement, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful.
لقد جئت إلى أمريكا.
I came to the United States.
لأني أعلم أنها بلد الحرية.
Because I know this is the place of freedom.
جئت إليها لأدافع عن بلدي.
I came to defend my country.
ولأهاجم النظام المصري.
And to attack the Egyptian regime,
فلا بد أن أسعى إلى استقرار أمريكا.
So I should help
والمحافظة على أمنها.
the place where I'm staying at.
لا على إحداث أي خلل
not to cause any disturbance or trouble what I'm
حتى أتمكن من خدمة قضيتي.
So I can fulfill my plan and my cause.
وأنا أدافع عن مصر.
I defend Egypt.
ورئيس النظام المصري حسني مبارك
and the president of the Egyptian regime
يحكم مصر بالحديد والنار
is controlling Egypt with iron and fire.
وحسني مبارك يهدر حقوق الإنسان.
And Hosni Mubarak is violating the freedom of the human rights.
فلا يأمن مصري على دمه ولا عرضه ولا ماله ولا سره.
An Egyptian cannot feel secure inside his home, his property or his honor.
وحسني مبارك يقتل المصريين في المساجد.
Hosni Mubarak is killing Muslims in the mosques.
ولا أدل على ذلك من قتله 30 أو 40 في مسجد أسوان.
And there is no more evidence other than killing 30 to 40 Muslims in mosque in Aswan in Upper Egypt.
وحسني مبارك قتل المئات في الشوارع والميادين.
Hosni Mubarak killed hundreds in the squares and in the streets.
وحسني مبارك يعذب المسجونين والمعتقلين.
Hosni Mubarak is torturing the people in the prisons and jails.
بالصعق الكهربائي
with electric shocks
وبالكلاب المجوعة المصغورة
and with the vicious dogs
وبتعليق المصري من رجليه في السقف
and hanging the people upside down from the ceilings
وبضربه بالعصي الغليظة
and slashing them with sticks
وبهتك أعراض نسائه
and with raping women.
وحسني مبارك هو وأولاده يملكوا الملايين من الدولارات.
They are controlling millions of dollars.
فمن أين أتى بها؟
Where did they get it from?
وهل ورثها عن آبائه وأجداده؟
Did he inherit it through his parents and grandparents?
وحسني مبارك ليس عنده حرية.
Hosni Mubarak has no freedom.
ولا ديمقراطية.
There is no democracy.
ومع ذلك يفهم العالم أن نظامه
he's showing to the whole world that his regime is based on democracy.
وحسني مبارك يملك
Hosni Mubarak
يملك هو وأولاده
He's controlling he and his children
الكثير من الأموال والضيعات وأراضي مصر
on the lands of Egypt.
على حين يعيش الشعب المصري
In the meantime, the
في
Egyptians,
القبور أو ما يشبه
they are
القبور.
living in the graves or similar to graves.
فلا يغتر أحد بما تدعيه وسائل الأعلام.
So nobody should be fooled by what the Egyptian media is portraying.
وعلينا أن نسعى إلى إبادة هذا النظام
We
وإسقاطه.
should eliminate this except what agree with Islam.
Government sources also say that the people who are connected to this bombing were worshippers at your mosque. Is it possible that worshippers at your mosque could have been connected to this bombing?
يقول لك ممكن الناس اللي كانوا راحوا الجامعة عندك هم على اتصال بهذه الفرقعة.
الذي يأتي إلى المسجد المسجد مفتوح لأي إنسان يأتي فيه.
The mosque open to everybody who wants to worship.
وأنا لا أنفي أن أي إنسان يأتي ويصلي ورائي.
I do not object on anybody who come and pray after me.
وأنا لا أصلي في مسجد واحد.
I don't pray in one mosque.
بل أصلي في مئات المساجد.
I pray in hundreds of mosques.
منها مساجد لوس أنجلوس.
And I pray also in the mosques of Los Angeles.
فأنا أصلي في مساجد أمريكا كلها.
So I pray in any mosque in the United States.
All right, Sheikh, thank you again. We're going to take a break, but we'd like you to stay with us because we're going to come right back after a couple of minutes. We'll be right back. Accused of having ties to the World Trade Center bombing. We continue our conversation Sheikh, we understand the U.S. government feels that you should be deported. How hard and how long will you fight deportation?
الحكومة الأمريكية عايزة ترحلك، فهتقدر تحاربهم جامد ازاي والمدة قد ايه؟
أنا لا أحارب الحكومة الأمريكية.
I don't fight the U.S. government.
إنما أسير على القانون الأمريكي.
But I follow the U.S. justice system.
والقانون الأمريكي يعطيني حق الاستئناف.
And the American justice system gave me the right to appeal.
وقد أمرت المحامي بأنه.
And I told my lawyer to make an appeal of this decision.
وليست هذه محاربة.
And this is not a fighting.
كيف تسمونها محاربة؟
How do you call appealing a decision?
محاربة فأنا أحارب.
Is a fight, and if the law says appeal is a fight, so I'm fighting.
وهذا الحكم من القضاء إنما كان.
And this decision from the justice system was expected.
إذ قام الإعلام بحملته المصعوبة.
As the mass media made all these tremendous
وهم يعلمون أن وقت الحكم في هذه الأيام.
The decision making from the court is near these days.
فقد شارك الإعلام في إصدار هذا الحكم.
The mass media really decided in issuing this decision.
ذلك لأنه ضغط على الرأي العام.
As they pressed the opinion and they pressured the public opinion.
وللرأي العام ضغط على المحكمة.
And the public opinion pressured the court decision.
فهذا الحكم منتظر.
So that decision was expected, and I didn't expect other than that.
Does he believe that there is some kind of media conspiracy against him?
بتقول لك هل تفتكر ان في مؤامرة من الإعلام ضدك؟
نعم.
He says yes.
And why does the Sheikh feel that way?
بتقول لك ليه انت بتحس كده؟
أولا.
First.
بعض المجلات.
Some of the magazines,
صورتي مع صورة من يدعي.
They showed my picture on in front of the picture of David Koresh, the guy from Texas.
قتل من الشرطة ما يقرب من 5.
And that guy in Texas, he killed many of the federal agents and he injured many of them.
فماذا فعلته أنا وماذا قدمت؟
So what did I do to show my picture in front of his picture?
هذه مؤامرة من الإعلام.
This was a conspiracy from the media to show me that way.
ثانيا إخراج صورتي مئات المرات.
Showing my picture hundreds of times.
مقرونة بالمتهمين.
Connected with those who are accused in the bombing of the World Trade Center.
مما يدل بالتصوير وإن لم يكن باللفظ.
And that shows with the picture, even if the word has not been said, that implied being accused like them.
ثالثا.
Third.
ذكر صورتي مع قتل السادات.
Showing my picture in connection with killing of President Sadat.
وقتل كهانة.
And the killing of Kahana in New York.
مما وقد اشتركت القناة 9.
And Channel 9
أول الحديث
showed that in the beginning of this newscast.
وعليكم أن تحترموا القضاء.
And you should respect
حكمه في ذلك.
the justice system that has been decided that I have no connection with that.
رابعا.
Fourth.
ذكر المسجد الذي أصلي فيه بأنه مركز إعلام في العالم.
Mentioning the mosque where I prayed in New Jersey that this is the center of terrorism all over the world.
مما جعل الغوغاء يضربونه بالحجارة.
And that showed the crazy, foolish people throwing rocks and destroying it.
خامسا.
Fifth.
إذا كان الإعلام لا يربط جرائم النصارى ولا جرائم اليهود.
The mass media does not join the crimes of the Jews and the Christians with the priests and rabbis.
فلماذا يربطون جرائم بعض المسلمين?
Why are they connecting the crimes of some Muslims
بالرموز الإسلامية
with the Muslim scholars and Islam in general?
كل ذلك مظاهر تدل على أنها مؤامرة من الإعلام.
All these show that this is a conspiracy from the mass media.
وعلى الشعب الأمريكي.
And for the American people.
وهو ذو فطرة طيبة.
And they have with a good nature.
ألا يأخذ معلوماته من الإعلام.
Don't take for granted the information from the mass media.
لأنه يكذب ويخون.
Because there is a lot of lying.
All right, would you explain to the Sheikh that that's why we invited him here tonight to answer some of those charges? And in agreement, we have to get his closing statement now.
هديك بقى اللي هي الحته الاخيره اللي تقفل بيها. يلا. خاتم.
أنادي العالم الغربي.
I'm calling the Western world.
والعالم الأمريكي بخاصة.
And the American public in general. in particular,
أنه ما دام يحافظ على حقوق الإنسان
as long as they are protecting human rights
وينادي بالحرية
and they
والديمقراطية
are calling for freedom and democracy,
فعليه أن يقوم بذلك ويسعى إليه
they must
في العالم
fulfill that all over the
كله
world,
في الشرق العربي.
and especially in the Middle East.
فكيف تساعد أمريكا النظام المصري
How can the United States helping the Egyptian regime
وهو ليس عنده حرية
when
ولا
they have
ديمقراطية؟
no freedom and no democracy?
حتى الرئيس المصري
Even President Mubarak,
لم ينتخب انتخابا
he
صحيحا،
was not elected in an honest way,
ومجلس الشعب عنده
and the parliament
لا ينافي الديمقراطية.
is totally away from democracy.
فعلى أمريكا ألا تساعد النظام المصري
So I urge the United States not to help the Egyptian regime
وألا تساعد الأنظمة
and not to help
لا تقوم بالحرية.
all the dictatorships that does not provide freedom.
على أمريكا أن تساعد كل من
I urge the
على
United
حقوق الإنسان.
States that to help all those who are trying to protect and preserve human rights.
وماذا تعيب علينا أمريكا أو يعيب علينا وسائل الإعلام في أمريكا؟
What the United States and the media is putting a fault at us.
هل يعيبون علينا أننا ننادي بالمحافظة على حقوق الإنسان؟
Are they blaming us for trying to protect human rights?
ومنظمة العفو الدولية أثبتت
and the International Human Organization,
بتقريرين صدر سنة 90
they proved in two reports in 1990
أن هناك 10 سنين من التعذيب في مصر.
there have been 10 years of torture in Egypt.
وصدر تقرير سنة 93
and in 1993 another report came out
منظمة العفو الدولية
from the Human Rights Organization
يبين هدر حقوق الإنسان.
shows the violation of human rights in Egypt.
فعليه الغرب أن ينتبه إلى ذلك.
So I urge the Western countries
وأمريكا
to look
التي
for that, and the United States
يجب أن تنتبه إلى هذا الأمر.
who cares for human rights, who I wish and I urge them to look after for that.
Sheikh, again,
Thank you very much.
thank you, and unfortunately, we are out of time for the interview. Thank you again for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much.
We'd like to inform our viewers that we will continue to follow this story in a fair and accurate manner, as Prime 9 News is accustomed to doing. A shocking end to a real-life morning. Both men said recent discussions with Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and comments by Arab leaders showed a determination to solve the region's long-standing disputes. They spoke to reporters in the White House East Room.
For the Middle East, the year 1993 can determine whether the new century is consumed by old enmities or used to unlock the human and material potential of the people. Our historic mission is to make this a year of peace, and I'm delighted to have President Mubarak as a partner in pursuing this mission.
Together, we can make the ends meet and bridge the existing gaps. Equally important is the task of removing the remaining obstacles, especially that of the deportees. I was pleased to hear from President Clinton that significant progress has been on this issue, and that he recognized the importance of the Middle East peace talks. He is committed to use the influence of the United States to achieve meaningful progress in these talks when they are resumed on April the 20th.
The two leaders also said they were sharing intelligence information about fundamentalist Islamic terrorism. Mr. Clinton said he had ordered a review to see if the U.S. had received any information which could have tipped off authorities about the World Trade Center bombing. We'll have a newsmaker interview with President Mubarak later in the program. Cleric, many Egyptian militants proclaim as their spiritual leader. He and 48 others are charged with inciting violence. They were acquitted at an earlier trial. Egyptian authorities say the Sheikh's followers have waged a 16-month terror campaign in which 150 people have been killed, including many foreign tourists. The Sheikh has lived in the United States since 1990, and suspects in the World Trade Center bombing worshipped at his New Jersey mosque. Robin? Willing to compromise on his economic stimulus package. The plan has been stalled in the Senate by a Republican filibuster and stopped the countdown 11 seconds before liftoff. It was the second time in 2 weeks that a shuttle launch has been aborted in the final seconds. NASA scheduled another launch attempt Thursday for Discovery's mission to study the Earth's ozone layer.
That's our summary of the day's news. Now it's on package and new strategies for cigarette makers.
First tonight, a newsmaker interview with the president of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, a key figure in Middle East diplomacy, but a political leader under increasing pressure at home. Hosni Mubarak was at the White House today for his first meeting with President Clinton. Diplomacy and aid were on the Mubarak-Clinton agenda, as usual for these Oval Office settings. But some other issues also were intruding, high among them terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism. In Egypt, as elsewhere throughout the Middle East and North Africa, fundamentalism as a religious and political expression is rapidly gaining force, especially among the young who have grown disillusioned with both Western-style secularism and their inability to climb out of poverty. But in Egypt, these manifestations have taken a particularly bitter and violent edge. There have been attacks, some fatal, by fundamentalists on Western tourists, who are a major source of money, and also on Egyptian Christians, who make up 10% of Egypt's 56 million people, as well as on Westerners living in Egypt. The Egyptian government has cracked down on the fundamentalists with police raids on mosques and social clubs and other punitive measures, which have drawn criticism from human rights monitoring organizations. Scores of civilians and police have been killed since the crackdown began in December. On February 26, Americans were brutally reminded of an alleged link between terrorism in Egypt and in this country with the bombing of the World Trade Center in New York City. 6 people were killed and 1,000 injured. 5 of the men charged in the case were followers of the Egyptian fundamentalist leader Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman, now based in Jersey City, New Jersey, and Brooklyn, New York. The 54-year-old blind theologian managed to enter the United States despite being on a U.S. government terrorist list. Rahman was placed on that list following the Sadat assassination, when many of his followers were convicted by special tribunals. Rahman was among those acquitted. The U.S. government has taken steps to deport Rahman back to Egypt. But meanwhile, he continues to preach and give interviews and rally his followers in the United States.
فنحن أصحاب حق ندافع عن حقنا حتى آخر قطرة من دمائنا ونؤمن ونوقن أن الله ناصرنا وأن الله ينصر عباده المؤمنين.
The issues of fundamentalism and terrorism managed to force their way into the Clinton-Mubarak talks, as the two leaders indicated at a news conference following their meeting.
Unfortunately, violence is increasingly being used by certain misguided elements in many parts of the world, including the Middle East. Acute social and economic problems are being exploited in order to breed violence and anarchy. At the same time, foreign countries are interfering in the domestic affairs of other nations under false pretexts.
I think President Mubarak would support my contention that we have tried to step up our cooperation with the Egyptians in combating international terrorism since I've been president, and the United States has to review a lot of its policies in view of what happened at the World Trade Center to try to make sure we are doing everything we can to minimize the impact of terrorism in this country.
But following custom, the two leaders began their statement stressing the friendship between the U.S. and Egypt and their hopes for Middle East peace. Shortly after that session, I interviewed President Mubarak at the Blair House. President Mubarak, thank you for being with us. You met with President Clinton earlier today. You're the first Arab leader to be invited to the White House. What will you tell other Arab leaders of what your impressions are of Mr. Clinton?
Really, it's the first time for me really to meet with President Clinton. I find he's a very knowledgeable man. He listens, he discusses, and I think he's a very reliable man. This from the first meeting. I used to contact him several times by phone. We contacted each other, even once before the inauguration, and another time when there was problem in the deportees of the problem of the Middle East. We had some contacts.
By telephone?
By telephone.
Anything surprise you about him in particular?
He's a very charming man. You like to speak with him, discuss with him, and he is very flexible in all the issues which we discussed.
There was a senior Egyptian news editor and some others in your country who were quoted in the Washington Post today as saying that the Clinton administration appears biased toward Israel. Did you have a concern in that direction before you met with him?
No, I didn't have this concern at all. I think the man is fair, and have discussed with him the problem with the Middle East from different aspects and other problems. But I didn't think that the man is biased.
Before you met with the president, you told reporters that you would try to persuade Mr. Clinton to urge the Israelis to speed up the timetable for returning the Palestinian deportees to Israel. But the president said today in the news conference that he was, in essence, that he's satisfied with what Israel has done so far.
I may not have said this exactly as you mentioned. I said I may have some small proposals to try to help moving this process much more quicker. And still I discussed some points with the president, and I'm going to discuss it with Mr. Rabin, because there's a package being done or agreed upon between Mr. Rabin and the President of the United States. And we know the package. You may have been informed about that, but I'm not in a position to tell about it. But we are trying to find some small points.
Speeding up the return of the deportees, is that a part of it?
Some small points to encourage the negotiations start on the 20th of April.
I want to turn you to another subject, which we understand. You said today, you talked to President Clinton about this, the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, terrorist incidents in your country. You said in an interview with the New York Times a couple of days ago that the World Trade Center bombing could have been prevented if the United States had listened to the advice that your country was giving.
Really, these words are not so accurate. I said we have cooperation with the United States concerning terrorism, and we have informed them about so many informations. But definite information that something was going to happen in the World Trade Center, we would be mistaken if we knew that beforehand and didn't inform the United States.
Do you think the bombing could have been prevented?
Nobody knew when the bombing was going to take place, even here or there. But we are speaking about terrorism as a whole. If they knew beforehand that something was going to happen in the World Trade Center, I think they would have avoided that. And I don't think that the police or the intelligence knew beforehand this and left the situation, or left these people to do this bombing. I don't think that.
So you're saying it's not accurate to say that there was specific information that the United States had?
Either I'm not accurate, or it seems that the correspondent didn't understand me perfectly well. I had no definite information about what happened to the World Trade Center.
There have been reports, as I know you're aware, that there may have been a motive involved in all this, a retaliation on the part of the Iraqis for U.S. attacks against Iraq. Do you have any information about that?
I have no information, but I heard it from different factions that this may be a retaliation to what happened in Iraq by the United States. But you are going to hear a lot of things. Everybody will say a retaliation for the Libyan, a retaliation for the Iraqis. Let us wait until the investigation comes to an end, then everything will be very clear.
Well, as you know, again, in connection with this bombing, Sheikh Omar Abd al-Rahman went on trial again in your country.
Yes.
Today he's the gentleman who's considered to be the spiritual leader of these gentlemen who are accused, who are suspects in the bombing. Went on trial again today in Egypt in absentia for organizing illegal demonstrations back, 3 or so years ago. How much of a threat is he to the United States and to Egypt?
Look, I don't look to Umar Abd al-Rahman. He's an Egyptian. He's a normal man to Egypt. He is welcome to come to Egypt. The retrial, I just heard about it in the newspaper in Egypt. I had no idea. Because I'm not interfering in every small details in the country. And this man, his followers are very few. We don't fear him. And he's not a threat. You are keeping him in the United States, let him stay in the United States. You want to go to another country, you could go. We don't consider him as a threat. He was living in Cairo, in one of the governments called Fayoum. We don't think that he's a threat to us at all.
So you're saying the media and maybe authorities in the U.S. have made him more important?
Your media made him a very key figure, but believe me, he's not that famous figure as you mentioned in the CNN, for example. I remember that there was a dialogue with him. It was very strange. I have never seen the man before. Even I heard about his name maybe 1 year ago. I had no idea about this man. His followers are very few.
But even so, U.S. authorities think he was the inspiration for some of this. He is saying, as you know, he's criticizing your government, saying you are putting people in jail without due process, that people have been tortured. He's talking about...
Look, what do you expect a man like this was being declared that he's going to be retried? Like Abu Halima, when he came here, his lawyer said he was tortured.
This is another suspect in the world.
He was tortured. Believe me, we have law and order in our country. And we have a good judicial system. And whoever thinks that the law is violated or being tortured, he is free to go to the court. We never prevent anybody of that. That is one of the pillars of democracy. But just to keep saying, we were tortured, go to the court. Some of these people, sometimes they bring cigarettes and they burn their hands. And then complain. And there was no proof. If there is any proof, I'll support that.
But how do you explain then this organization, Middle East Watch, which is the human rights watchdog organization, which says you've documented, and this has been in the news media, rounded up 700 suspects in recent weeks. 29 people have been killed in the last month, including some of your own police officials. There have been torture of detainees and so on and so on.
They are exaggerating in that sense. We have some of the police officers were killed. Some of the police soldiers were killed. That give you an indication that these fundamentals are very cruel. We will not use such a thing. We were not used to killing even our police. We were not used to use fire. These people who started the dialogue for quite a long time with them. Nowadays they dialogue with the machine gun and the bombs. And I think you may remember one of these people who have killed one of the tourists in Upper Egypt escaped. He fled and went to Alexandria in some place. When the policeman wanted to catch him, he held 2 children in his hand so as to protect himself. The policeman didn't shoot at him. He wanted to catch him. So suddenly he put the 2 children on the ground and he killed the police officer. They want the police find these people killing them, to tell them hello and bring them a cup of tea and a piece of cake. In any police in the world, even in your country, in Europe, anywhere, the police has to follow the law. They are not allowed to use fire unless to defend themselves.
But as you know, many of these fundamentalist groups, this Islamic group, is saying that your government is repressive, that it's denying due process, that it is not permitting democracy to flourish.
That's good. That's good. We are not with democracy, and they want democracy. Believe me, these people, whenever they take power, there will be no kind of democracy at all. They are against, they deny democracy, they deny parties, they deny government, they deny armed forces, they deny everything. So don't believe that. We know them very well. We have a very good idea about them, and the police understand them very well.
At the same time, as you know, the analysts, the experts on your part of the world say that because of the economic difficulties in your country, many people living in poverty, that people are going to be attracted to this political argument, and they're not going to wait for someone like you and your government to fix things and make life more comfortable.
I agree with you. We are going through economic reform, and the economic reform has its side effects. The side effects, some burden on the people. And this I told the people before starting the economic reform. And this is everywhere, all over the world. Whenever there's economic reforms, that people are affected. At the same time, we are making reforms of the economy. With another 2-3 years, there will be stabilization. At the same time, we are working hard to raise the standard of the people who are being affected. But we can't do it overnight. And those who are sitting here and accusing the government, they could go to Egypt and accuse the government. There we have criticism every day in the newspaper. This is not something new.
Just one other thing I want to ask you about. You have criticized Iran as being one of the countries behind this fundamentalist unrest in Egypt and other places. People in the United States still perceive Iraq as the big enemy in your part of the world. We're 2 years after the Gulf War. People view Saddam Hussein as the big villain. And yet, when we hear you make some of your points about what's happening in your country, it sounds as if you're saying Iran is the bigger threat. What do you believe?
I believe in Iran. Iraq is in a mess now. It's a very bad situation. The people are suffering. But Iran sees the opportunity that Iraq is in a mess and is trying to use the difficulties which, for example, our country is passing through to create hell of problems. For one simple reason. Iran wants to have upper hand on the Gulf countries, on the oil fields there. The only problem in front of them is Egypt and President Mubarak. Since there was the Damascus Declaration, they doesn't want Egypt to be included in the defense of the Gulf countries. They are Arab countries. So we're trying hard, but we will never sit folded hands. They wanted to destabilize Egypt so as to keep Egypt away. We will never be kept away.
So when President Clinton mentions again today that the sanctions need to be kept against Iraq, is U.S. policy on the right track when we focus still so much against Iraq?
The U.S. policy depends mainly on the UN resolution. And I said several times that Iraq should comply with the UN resolutions. If this compliance could continue, I think sanctions may be lifted by the UN also.
And then what? And then Iraq rejoins the community of nations?
Maybe.
So that we can coexist with Saddam Hussein?
We shouldn't speak about Saddam Hussein. Let us speak about the Iraqi people who are suffering. And the sanctions, the people who are affected are the Iraqi people. Saddam Hussein may be not suffering from that sanction, but the people, the majority, the whole people of Iraq are suffering. That's why we are trying to find out a solution, how to help these people to live.
And you shared this with President Clinton?
Yes, I discussed it with President Clinton.
President Mubarak, we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the News Hour, the European education. Outside the gates, the liberated Egyptian womanhood casts off her veil. Ironically, inside the gates, they're now busy putting it back on. Today, it's the Muslim groups among both teachers and students who come to dominate the university life. Makeshift mosques have sprung up in the corridors, lectures halted to accommodate the call for prayer.
Okay, look at the dialogue here. Okay, now, what do you find amusing in the dialogue? Okay.
Even the most traditionally liberal and westernized faculty, English, now observe the Islamic dress code and an unconscious segregation of the sexes in class.
I have been dining with Arabella this evening. Who's Arabella?
But this newfound modesty isn't entirely spontaneous. There are other forces at work behind the scenes. Dr. Asim Fahim has a mission in life: to convert as many of his young students as possible to the Islamic cause. He's particularly proud of his success rate in persuading hesitant women to wear the Islamic headdress, or hijab.
Yesterday, a girl had put on the hijab, and she said, I feel like I'm a new guy, a new girl. It is very strange that their friends said to her that your face is becoming lighter.
Assoum's conversions underline an important fact. 10 years ago, few women in Egypt bothered to wear Islamic dress. Now 70% have donned the veil, covering their hair, arms, legs, and often their faces. Why are the young turning to Islam? Why in the cities of the East are the mosques overflowing, the faithful carrying their prayer mats out onto the streets? Why do these young people seek solutions in a rigid faith founded 1,300 years ago?
Islam is unsoiled by some of the other ideologies which have been tried. Socialism and capitalism, for example, have been attempted in Egypt and have failed. Islam, in contrast, is untainted, at least in recent years.
Islam is the only major monotheistic religion in the world that also offers a political system, and therefore a natural alternative. Also, in an age of increasing political tension and often repression, the mosque has become the last refuge for dissent.
In Egypt, that dissent arose out of dramatic events that have happened within the lifetime of most young Muslims. In the 1950s, Gamal Abdel Nasser rode to victory, overthrowing a decadent monarchy. Soon the British were forced out, the Suez Canal nationalized. Ordinary Muslims rode on a wave of national pride. Nasser was a hero.
We trusted Nasser very much. We thought he was a great hope. He was taking us up to being a big state. Egypt was something now in the first pages of every newspaper. And he was fulfilling our own dreams, things which we were dreaming of. Nasser made them true.
The Muslims also had a dream, but Nasser crushed it ruthlessly. Muslim militants were rounded up, imprisoned, and executed. They had helped Nasser to power, and in return they had demanded a say in the new Egypt. But Islam was to have no part in Nasser's modern socialist state. In 1967, Nasser led Egypt into a war with Israel. He promised the war would destroy the Jewish state once and for all. What happened was quite the reverse. In just 6 days, the Israeli army obliterated the Egyptians.
Something I remember about that time, my father, he was in the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He is a very strong man, no sentimental feelings at all, but when we were defeated, I saw him taking the Quran and went to a balcony and began to read. And for my first and last time, I had seen my father crying. In that time, I feel what is meant by being defeated. I feel that is not that our country defeated. I had seen this on the face of my father, a catastrophe, where we were the first in the Arabian world, then we are down. At the time, I never trust Nasser again.
Nasser's bold brand of socialism had failed. The sheer scale of the defeat devastated the country. In their despair, Egyptians sought to find an explanation. The answer came back quickly. Egypt had abandoned Islam. Israel had remained pure to its religion. The defeat was the judgment of Allah.
Israel is the only country all over the world where 100% from 100% are Jews. They are fighting under this religion. And we were fighting for communist, for equality, for anything except our religion.
When Nasser died shortly afterwards, his successor, Anwar Sadat, was quick to exploit this national mood of guilt. In a tiny village 10 miles out of Sinai, Anwar Sadat, the new president of Egypt, joined the village people in prayer.
The press coverage portrayed Sadat as clearly at home among his people and genuinely uninterested in the outward trappings and rituals of high office. One news reporter said, "His faith is deep, but simple, and it brings him close to those he wounds." Sadat carefully cultivated his public relations image of the devout Muslim. From now on, he would be seen each week at prayer, the self-styled believer president.
We used to go to the mosque every Friday, and he cared very much to have all the cameramen from all over the world to watch him and to show him while praying ardently and praying to God and, you know, doing like this. And he was very funny. And so nobody believed, because he was acting.
For Sadat, Islam was no more than a convenient cloak. In time, he would simply cast it aside to reveal his true colors.
Sword of SLC presents.
Egypt was now to become a model capitalist state in the image of the United States. The president opened the door to Western money and Western businessmen. Billions of dollars poured in. Luxury office blocks and banks sprang up. In place of crumbling slums, five-star hotels began to line the banks of the Nile. Hotels that few Egyptians could afford to enter.
So that started this open door policy, and it looked very attractive at the beginning because life was very severe here and there was a lack of everything. So people were happy and hopeful that they would get goods that they never saw before. Unfortunately, it went to silly and stupid projects like producing Coca-Cola and Schweppes. So there was nothing that would give jobs to the poor and so on. This flow of money coming suddenly like this made many people very rich, extremely rich, especially the people surrounding Sadat, who made millions and millions.
Under Sadat, Egypt was becoming two nations. Each day, the gap grew wider. One side was a rich elite flaunting its newfound wealth, copying the manners and lifestyles of the West.
It did, in fact, open the door for all forms of speculation, of people becoming easily rich, of mafias mushrooming. One interesting thing here is how in the jargon of these mafias, when you achieve your first million, you have received your first rabbit. Because once you've made your breakthrough beyond the first million, well, rabbits proliferate easily.
Desperately struggling on the other side was the poor. Egypt was undergoing a great social change. Once the granary of the Middle East, it could no longer feed its population, now growing at the rate of 1 a minute. As the countryside failed to support them, thousands upon thousands flooded into the capital each week in search of work and food. Immigrants without a home or job prospects of any kind became a sea of resentment, condemned to squalor in a society which rewards corruption and greed. Islam became their voice.
With people becoming without any justified reasons very rich, and others compelled to remain poor. One way to transform your frustrations into virtues is to explain your behavior in terms of religion. When you say that I am a Puritan and I do this and that in terms of the Quran, it's a way to justify why I'm compelled not to accept this and that because I'm not able to do it, but don't have the means to do it. Those who cannot become rich and want to remain virtuous, it's dignified for a woman to wear a long dress. and on the same time, you can't afford to dress otherwise. It's a way to immunize yourself against the frustrations of the open door policy when you can't make your breakthrough into wealth.
The new Muslim that appeared out of this frustration was young and militant. They blamed the West and its corrupting influence for their troubles. They are nurtured on horror stories of life in the West, a life they feel Westerners are trying to impose upon them. Safinus Qasim is a leading Muslim writer and was once a Broadway theater critic. But her time in the West only served to harden her opinions.
We see that you are obsessed with sex. That's why you walk nude in the West, and that's why they act in the relationship between men and women in the streets. They kiss each other, and in some gardens in Europe, they even intercourse in front of everybody. This we can see, this is against the dignity of mankind.
What do you say it's anti-Islam? What examples, what proof of
this interview by itself, your astonishment that a Muslim wanted to be governed by Islam, the mere astonishment is an insult. If you want in the Christian land to be governed by Christianity, I won't be astonished. On the contrary, I'm very astonished that you are not ruled by Christianity. You see? So here in this Muslim land, you are coming here, you question us why you want Islam to rule. By this is just a simple manifestation of anti-Islam.
As the young Muslims' resentment grew, Egypt became a bomb with a very short fuse. In 1977, the bomb went off. Virtually bankrupt, despite the millions that had flowed in, Sadat had been forced to cut the subsidies on basic foods. Thousands took to the streets. They were the worst riots Cairo had ever seen. Sadat had to back down. The riots had left him a shaken man, forcing him to take the biggest gamble of his life.
At 8 p.m. precisely, Israel time, the presidential aircraft landed at Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv, after a journey lasting 22 minutes but spanning 30 years.
With the promise of vast amounts of American aid for his ailing economy, Anwar Sadat, the self-styled believer president, flew into the arms of Islam's greatest enemy. Stage. From now on, his every move would be in the spotlight of the Western media, who hailed him as the man who single-handedly brought peace to the Middle East. And yet there was a deep uneasiness, even among his closest colleagues.
He was really gambling, a big gamble, and had he succeeded, by all means he would have been a great international hero, but he mishandled the whole thing and made a mess out of it.
For devout Muslims, this peace was the ultimate sacrilege. Jerusalem, the third holiest shrine in Islam, was to remain in Israeli hands.
For the religious Muslims, Jerusalem counts very much to every Muslim, whether in Egypt or all of the Arab world and Muslim world, and he failed to restore Jerusalem.
As protests against Camp David increased, Sadat cracked down on opposition. On one day alone, 3,000 people were arrested.
It is a purge.
Domestically, Sadat was viewed as the new pharaoh. He was viewed as a man who could ignore issues of Islam. He was viewed as a man who could
engage in foreign policies which were reprehensible to Muslims on the one hand and engage in domestic repression on the other hand.
I opened the door and suddenly I was surrounded by about 8 or 7 people with guns, searching everywhere and every place, find nothing. Then they said you should come with us for 5 minutes only.
In fact, it was not until a year later that Dr. Asim Fahim was allowed to return home. He had been arrested as a known Muslim activist.
During the interrogation, we came from the sound, no, this guy is, they are putting electricity on him, you know, or this guy is, they are putting cigarettes on his skin. You know why we can differentiate between that and this? From the scream. When we scream like a train, or he shivered, this is electricity. When it is one scream and stopped, this is a cigarette.
As the confrontation grew, it was the arrest of this man that sealed Sadat's fate. Muhammad Islambuli is a leader of jihad, dedicated to fighting for an Islamic State by any means, including murder. Islambuli's arrest and torture is only one of thousands. The difference was that his brother Khalid, an army officer and fellow member of jihad, had the means to exact revenge.
Beautiful, elegant, courageous. Khalid al-Islambuli had to be cruel only to be kind. He was the most gentle human person in this act.
Dawn in the streets of Cairo. 6 years after the assassination of Sadat, the group who killed him still carry on their fight for an Islamic Egypt. 3 days after this demonstration, which took over the center of Cairo, Muhammad Islambuli was arrested as a ringleader. Years later, there have been few concessions to Muslim demands for a change in Egyptian society. Young men and women still meet unchaperoned in defiance of Muslim traditions. And despite burnings and bombings, the bars and casinos still flourish. Those who can afford it still imitate the lifestyle of the West, to the disgust of the militant Muslims.
Many of them see that the West has come back in new forms, in the form of the multinational, advertising, television shows, Dallas, I Dream of Jeannie, Dynasty, all the kind of things that touch and insult their sensibility, their value system, and so on. Now, of course, whoever brings these things in is not just Westerners, but a segment of society that loves the West, enjoys the West, likes to ally itself with the West. So the anger of many of the Islamic militants is equally directed toward the rulers who ally themselves to the West, as well as against Western culture, Western domination through the multinational, through the IMF, through the World Bank, through the increasing debts that seem to be tying the hands of their society again.
Sword of Islam will return on TLC Presents.
Politically and socially, Egypt is more divided than ever. A series of riots, killings, and arrests have fanned the flames of the militants. As government repression increases, Islam becomes the opposition to the state. Sadat's successor, President Hosni Mubarak, walks a tightrope. He faces the demands of the Muslim militants, growing daily in strength and aggression. Yet Mubarak is aware that he must also appease those who oppose a Muslim Egypt, his government, his generals, and his American allies. Mubarak has inherited the mantle of his ill-fated predecessor. On television, he also cultivates the image of the believer president. Yet even in the mosque, the president must guard his back. More than 30 members of Jihad have been arrested for the attempted overthrow of his government. The shadow of Sadat lingers on in another way. Mubarak knows that sooner or later he too must cut the food subsidies to save his country from bankruptcy. It could ignite the explosion on the streets that the Muslim militants are waiting for.
These people are spreading underground, are gaining followers every day, and they can erupt out of the blues, I mean, and cause real trouble, I mean, with the masses following them and so things like this. I don't know what's the right way to handle these people, but I think that as long as our economic and social problems persist, then people tend to seek solutions through these religious groups and so on. So it is a threat, and could be a very big threat, I think.
It is a last resort out of frustration with any other solutions. And as long as it is not possible to prove that there are other solutions that can achieve results, this will be what people will resort to, whether it produces results or not.
2 miles away, as Mubarak says his prayers, some of his sworn enemies gather in secret at a mosque. They are members of Jihad, and many of their brothers, as they call themselves, are now in prison. But many remain at large, unknown to the police, meeting in small backstreet mosques like these. These young men see Iran as their ideal, America as their enemy. Having killed one president, they are prepared to kill again.
علينا أن نسعى لتحقيق أهدافنا مهما كلفنا هذا من مشقة ومهما كلفنا هذا من عناء، فإن الله عز وجل يقول إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله فيقتلون ويقتلون وعدا عليه.
The jihad member is the one who is disposed, willing, and sometimes even eager to use violence to bring about the paradise lost. A jihad member, because of his youth, because of his impatience, because probably of lack of political wisdom, would try to bring about the Islamic State, even if he may have to destroy a lot of existing institutions, and in the process probably inflict a lot of human suffering, including a lot of human killing.
These are Egypt's fundamentalists, but thousands more just like them exist in every country in the Middle East. The reasons for their emergence vary from country to country, but they are all products of third world frustration. They envy and at the same time resent the West, its power and its wealth. They have a dream, a world where Islam, untried, untested, untainted by failure, will solve all their ills. Through Islam, they say, the poor people can rise up and be strong. Iran has shown the way.
Iran fulfilled our dreams. What happened in Iran should happen everywhere.
Why do you say that?
I say that because they fulfilled what we want. They are ruling themselves by Islam. So we want to rule ourselves by Islam.
نعتقد أن الإسلام سوف يعود مهما فعل الكافرون ومهما فعلت أمريكا أو روسيا، رضوا أم أبوا، رضي حسني مبارك أو رفض، فإن الإسلام سوف يعود ومهما كان الثمن. فنحن نعتقد أن إقامة الدولة الإسلامية لا بد أن يكون بثمن غال، ولو كان هذا الثمن هو استشهادنا، لأن الإسلام شجرة تقوى على الدماء وتنهض على الأشلاء. الإسلام شجرة تقوى وترتوي من دماء الشهداء. إن الإسلام سوف يعود وسوف يسود العالم.
The words of just a fanatical few, or does the new militant Islam present a real threat?
You're exploring the past on the Learning Channel, thanks in part to
Every year, Hussein bin Rashid al-Ajmi and his son Saeed spend all winter traveling hundreds of miles through the Rub al-Khali. This is where both nomads, Bedouin and camel, begin their wandering. They must search the vastness for pockets of green where rare rainstorms have brought on flat growth. It will be their winter grazing. The Bedouin followed Reem gazelle, knowing they would lead them to newly emerging plant life. Once they roamed the full expanse of the Arabian deserts. Now, only a few herds of Reem survive. The Arabian oryx was hunted almost to extinction, but has now been successfully reintroduced into the wild, and so has become a worldwide symbol of conservation. Cooler months bring desert birds, like the Hubara bustard, into the sands, where they also feed on winter growth. Hussein and his family will journey across these vast reaches of sand until they arrive at the oases of eastern Arabia. Arabia is at the heart of the world's largest desert system that follows an enormous arch from Morocco to China. Stretching across the southern end of Arabia, the Rub al-Khali is the largest continuous sand desert on Earth. Hussein's journey will take them through one of the most desolate of all landscapes. To the west, linear dunes form corridors of sand that stretch for hundreds of miles. To the east, the sand mountains rise range upon range, sculpted by monsoon winds thousands
tower 1,000 feet or more above the salt plain of ancient lake beds. Today the winds change only the surface pattern of the dunes, but the sand mountains themselves remain unchanged. Hussein, who's 66, has been venturing into the Rub al-Khali with his family since he was a child. If the pasture is good, the herd will go through the entire winter without water.